Hi, everybody. Good morning. You know, I just felt like dancing this morning. I just felt like it. Look at that. Do a little shaking in the morning and get a new member. What? It's true. Welcome to the morning show. This is HAL SPARKS Mornings, Mega Worldwide on a wonderful, crazy Friday. And I'm in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I'm dancing in my hotel room. Largely just, I would guess, there's a moment of sort of ego celebration in some of it, but also I'm glad to be out on the road doing stand-up again. It's a lovely thing. Crowds are lovely and they're good people, and we're having nice conversations after the show as well. And I'm continually shocked that people watch the show. So hi, thank you guys for being here. Now, there's you guys know that I am a terminal optimist. That I'm one of these people that, and I've said this many times, but as a Gen Xer, the world has been ending my entire life. And so I take every, new news story about the incoming destruction of our beautiful blue marble with a grain of salt. And while I treat the actual part of it with seriousness, the rest of the time, once you're done battening down the hatches, the rest is all just performance art, if you know what I mean. If you're concerned, sorry, I have to turn down the noise. Thanks for, look at that. I think that's just for the dancing. There is a reality that once you have done everything you can, the rest of what you can do is have a good time, is keep your spirits up, smile as much as possible, and live as much life as you possibly can. And not just because it's, I guess, because it feels better or some sort of, emotionally hedonistic reason, but because you actually are more functional that way. That if a new stress or a new problem arises, your brain isn't all mangled up and not dealing with the last one so much that you can't marshal all of your intellect and your spirit and your thoughts and your philosophies and your ethics all to bear on that. Because, willpower has an exhaustion point. And one of the ways you can avoid that willpower exhaustion point is to make a decision and stick to it. Because then you don't have to think about it anymore. That's why diets work when they do. That's why, motivational programs work when they do. It's because the person who's doing them, not the system itself, but the person who's doing them makes a decision based on that. And decision means to cut off from, there are no other options. And from this point on, this is how I behave. This is how people stave off their addictions for the rest of their lives and live healthfully, that kind of thing. So, the volume needs to come up. Let's see. Let's see. That might be as loud as I can get it. All right, just have to get closer. Let's see. I'm going to try and bring it up. I apologize. I'm kind of laid back this morning. That's how it operates. Where are we? There we go. Sorry. And input brio. Oh, the brio's turned way down. Look at that. That's much better. Is that better? There we go. Why was it turned down so much? Very strange. Anyway, so, ta-da! So, one of the things that's been aggravating me over the last couple of days is this And I'm seeing this Gish Gallop lie roll across a big swath of the Twitter sphere, and largely it's backed up by Russian bots and all that kind of shit that have been pushing this nonsense. Is this idea that we addressed when Jimmy Dore and Aaron Mate and these guys were doing it, and I kind of addressed it again, that the reason Putin had to do this is because NATO was expanding into Ukraine, and he's just scared, and he had to do it. And Noam Chomsky told you in 2015 that he was going to do it, and Henry Kissinger said that if you start doing it, he's going to get upset. He's going to do this. They told you in 1992. Well, especially because the U.S. This is the background of this argument. The U.S. made an agreement in 1990 with Yeltsin that we were not going to expand NATO into, wait for it, not, and by the way, when they say that, everybody's like, oh, well, then that's right, everything we've done ever since is just terrible. What we agreed to was not to expand NATO into East Germany after the fall of the wall into East Berlin. So the USSR and the USA truced it out so that Russia would continue to control East Germany, whether they were in there or not, and we would, and West Germany would be allowed self-determination. There just wouldn't be a wall anymore, which is the kind of negotiations you make when you're in a Cold War with the USSR. The USSR doesn't exist anymore. The Soviet Union collapsed. The country does not exist. Therefore, we are not holding up treaties or arrangements that we made with a country that no longer exists. That's nuts. Especially when it means, if by that definition, what everybody's been talking about, that Germany would not be a whole country right now because of an agreement that the U.S. made with a country that no longer exists. How in the world does that make any goddamn sense? How? What is that? How in the world? Honestly, why aren't we honoring the borders created by Genghis Khan then? Or, why don't we just, how about this? In respect for a united Russia and peace, why don't we just push back to the borders created during the Ottoman Empire while we're at it? And by the way, fuck Germany. If they want to be a whole country, it's too bad. The U.S. and NATO made an arrangement with the USSR while they were split in half, and we just got to stick to it. We have to stick to it. So Germany's not, according to these assholes, Germany should not be a whole country right now. And that, part of the problem was tearing down the wall. Puh. Secondly, in 1997, let me show you this. I posted this earlier, but I don't know why. Well, I do know why they don't bring it up, because it would fuck their argument into a cocked hat. But in 1997, let me shrink this down so you guys can see it. The Russia, post-Soviet Russia, hold on, let me move this over, there we go. Post-Soviet Russia and NATO signed a pact. See that date right there? See that date right here? Sorry, I'm on the wrong thing. See that date right there? May 27th, 1997. Russia and NATO signed a pact, a mutual, a cooperation and security mutual relations pact with Russia. Post-Soviet Union, dealing with where NATO might be, but also aligned security interests between Russia and NATO. Because breakaway regions like Chechnya and Ukraine and other places, their concern was at that time, now Russia had plans to puppet some of these guys, but other ones were breaking off in a way that they were going to align with the Middle East, namely Chechnya. And hence Chechen rebels, hence the bombing of the theater where the Chechen rebels had taken Russian hostages. Remember all that stuff? Okay, that's all part of this. And NATO was like, we're not worried about you anymore, Russia. We're worried about some of your breakaway countries like Kazakhstan, this is before it got on its feet, before it normalized with the rest of Europe and arguably with China and Russia as well, and became just basically a rich oil and gas country that minded its own fucking business. Kazakhstan was potentially dangerous as an Afghanistan spread as well. They were worried that what was happening, the Osama bin Ladening of Afghanistan after the Russians had been driven out of there, would spread to the rest of these countries, and they had nukes left over from Russia. Ukraine went, yeah, we have no interest in this shit. Russia, you can have your nukes back. We don't want to be a nuclear country. We want to be with Europe, just trading and being peaceful. So they gave all of it back. Belarus is now asking for those nukes, by the way, which should give you some indication of what side people are on. Anyways, this was the only NATO expansion that happened before this was the Soviet Union collapses and Germany becomes one country again. That's it. Conversations had started between 3 other countries that border Russia, but had also bordered these other regions and were concerned about the expansion or spreads of extremists and blah, 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 that they would join, namely Czechoslovakia, Poland, and what was the third one? Latvia, was it? Anyways, 3 countries that joined NATO in 1999. Now, I was dreaming when I wrote this, so forgive me if it goes astray, but this agreement signed 2 years before Poland and these other countries joined NATO, which is this evil expansion that Russia hated, and it just scares them. It's terrible and terrible. Had a bunch of stuff in here, not the least of which was, their agreement on a bunch of peace treaties and denuclearization and their agreement that borders would stay where they are and yada, yada, yada. They're like, well, look, basically there's another kind of a truce thing. Like, this is where the borders are. Leave them where they are. Well, cool. Everybody cool? Okay, everybody on the count of 3, put down your guns and walk backwards. And if anybody rolls in here and tries to fuck with all of us, we got each other's backs, okay? We got bigger fish to fry here. This is the bigger fish to fry agreement, okay? So Russia signed on to this. I cannot stress that enough. The Russian government signed on to this. They agreed to this with NATO. They read it. NATO read it. They had some notes. NATO had some notes. They finalized it. They translated it. They looked at everybody's translation. They had everybody translate the translations to make sure the translation said what they said. And then they fucking signed it. Russia signed this. They signed this. Okay, so in this, to achieve the aims of this act, NATO and Russia will base their relations on shared commitment to the following principles. This is what Russia signed on to in 1997, 2 years before Poland and these other countries joined NATO. Development on the basis of transparency, of a strong, stable, enduring, and equal partnership, and of cooperation of strength, security, and stability in the Euro-Atlantic area. Acknowledgement of the vital role that democracy, political pluralism, the rule of law, and respect for human rights and civil liberties, and the development of free market economies play in the development of common prosperity and comprehensive security. So Russia signed on to this part that if Ukraine and any of these other countries want to create trade alliances, if they want to fucking make widgets and ship them to Germany, and Germany makes Fukenglaggens and ships them back to Ukraine, that's fine. Cool. We're cool. Everybody got your guns down? All right, we're going to sign this part. We're fine. And that there's no violation of anybody's rights if anybody is involved in trade with these other countries. No, we're cool. We're cool. All right. So, refraining from the threat or use of force against each other as well as any other state, its sovereignty, territorial integrity, or political independence in any manner inconsistent with the United Nations Charter. Now, in the United Nations Charter, the existence of NATO and its expansion is completely fine. Russia knew this at the time. They know that now. This is not in violation of the UN. If sovereign countries want to join NATO because they feel it's necessary for their own security, the UN is cool with that. Always has been, always will be. Russia is part of the UN. They know this too. There aren't any hidden documents. This is what they know. And thank you, HT Breakout. tuition payment for today's class. I so appreciate you making a class covering history, geography, and world economics bearable. I'm trying. and I'm trying to not use too much adult language so that my little video doesn't get demonetized or kicked off or get the little yellow $sign, which I usually get because I use sparkly language. With the Declaration of Principles guiding relationships between participating states and contained in the Helsinki Final Act. We'll look at that in a minute. But that's, beyond the Minsk Agreement. The Helsinki Final Act is a much broader agreement that was actually agreed to by everyone, not the Minsk Agreement, which was done at the barrel of a gun from Russia. Here's the part that's going to bother everyone who is shitting on the idea that Ukraine has the right to join NATO or the EU, because this really isn't about Ukraine joining NATO. They weren't going to join the last decade. They weren't going to join in the next decade. They will now, because now it doesn't make any fucking sense for them not to. Once they stabilize, they're going to have to join NATO to keep this shit from happening again. Because this is a trust game. They fell once and landed on spikes. They're not going to do it again. This is the part everybody needs to pay attention to. And this is, again, signed in 1997, 2 years before Poland and these other countries joined NATO. Russia signed off on this document with NATO, not with some rando, not under the UN Charter of a Second Tier bubble. Direct talks with NATO. Respect for sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of all states and their inherent right to choose the means to ensure their own security, the inviolability of borders, and people's right of self-determination as enshrined in the Helsinki Final Act and other OSCE documents, which is another agreement that the Russians and the European Union had to protect themselves from invasion by, I guess, a new Ottoman Empire or some shit like that. But this is the part that sticks out. Their inherent right to choose the means to ensure their own security. Ukraine, as a sovereign country, as agreed on by Russia in 1997, can join NATO if they fucking well want to. You cool? I'm cool. Cool? Everybody's guns on the ground? Cool. We're all going to sign this? Cool. This is not a NATO declaration. This is not a Russian declaration. This is not a Russian treaty, worked out in a puppet country like Belarus against Ukraine while they're on the downslope and run by a Russian sock puppet where they agree to whatever Russia fucking wants in territories it takes. This is an agreement that the government of Russia and the NATO alliance agreed to. Over months, they worked this shit out. Do you know how long these kind of agreements take? And what did Russia sign to in a legally binding treaty, as Vladimir Putin likes to throw around, and his enablers? This is, and by the way, it's too late for NATO to join Ukraine to join NATO on the fly. That's not going to happen. This will have to work its way out into whatever circumstance it does. If Russia divides it in half, if they retreat, whatever happens at the tail end of this, because Russia's not going to keep Ukraine forever. This is just going to be, 1 million refugees have left Ukraine. That means there's 44 million Ukrainians staying to fight. Like, this isn't going to be, and it isn't Ukraine, it isn't Afghanistan, because Russians didn't look at Afghanis as their blood relatives. They looked at them as, it's just a foreign other. They don't look at Ukrainians that way. Russian soldiers shooting at Ukrainians is a way different situation. This is more akin to a civil war. And those are bloody, go on for a long time. And one side or the other often just gets tired of killing their own. So this agreement, this 1997 mutual relations, cooperation, security agreement between NATO and the Russian Federation, signed in Paris on May 27th, 1997, gives Russian approval for any country, any sovereign country, of which at that point it was understood that Ukraine was one, the right to join NATO or not join NATO. Period. End of story. Stop it. Stop this fucking bullshit. that they don't have the right to, or this was a provocation. Russia signed off on this being okay a long time ago, when they were playing nice for a while, when they were either honestly trying to enter into a liberal democracy thing and they were sideswiped by the fact that in 1999 the country was handed over to Vladimir Putin and he decided that just kidding, we were rope-a-doping. The whole idea that the USSR is gone is nonsense. We're actually just going to call it Russia but run it the same way as a modern kleptocracy. So this is and by the way, there was no upend of this. There was no moment where Russia tore up the 97 mutual agreement, therein saying no longer can anybody do that. This was agreed to by Russia and NATO. After and then 2 years later, Poland joined, for example, and other countries joined NATO. And so the complaint that other countries were going to join after they signed this is horseshit. Russia already agreed with NATO that if people want to join NATO or stay out of NATO, that's up to them. The importance of this entire thing is that both Russia and NATO at that point, in terms of European borders and the rights of sovereign countries, agreed to respect for sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of all states and their inherent right to choose the means to ensure their own security. The inviolability of borders and people's rights of self-determination as enshrined in the Helsinki Final Act and other OSCE documents. Mutual transparency in creating and implementing defense policy and military doctrines, of which, by the way, NATO has lived up to and Russia has not. Prevention of conflicts and settlements of disputes by peaceful means in accordance with the UN and OSCE principles, which obviously Russia violated when they invaded the Donbass and Crimea. Support on a case-by-case basis of peacekeeping operations carried out under the authority of the UN Security Council or the responsibility of the OSCE. So both, if the UN Security Council says there's a security issue that needs to be handled, NATO and Russia agree in this document to fight side by side if and when this ever comes up. So, and they set up a permanent joint council to work this out. So everybody meets and regularly. The kind of shit you don't hear about on the news because nobody talks about this because it seems like bureaucracy, but it exists. And so everyone who is clamoring about this bullshit that NATO expansion is the reason for Russia, getting all nervous and invading Ukraine is bullshit. Because they already agreed to this in 97. And they barely hemmed and hawed when Poland joined because they were under this agreement and they recognized that Poland's joining in with NATO was part of an alliance that they also linked up with the OSCE, which is an alliance between NATO and Russian, interests. The problem is that Russia failed to become or continue to be a country. And it devolved into an oil and gas kleptocracy run by a bigoted psychopath and a gangster with a chip on his shoulder about the loss of the USSR. That's what this is about. And after we pulled out of Afghanistan, they had and timed against the coming demographic collapse of Russia, meaning that their fighting force of human beings will be cut in half in the next 10 years. And the fact that Ukraine's population is actually one of the few European ones that's expanding. And Ukraine, a free and independent Ukraine, has a potential for being as big as or more important than Germany in terms of EU negotiations and the like. It is an the potential for power in this area is overwhelming. It's a giant country with a lot of resources and a lot of history and all this stuff. It's basically the heart of what used to be sort of Russian culture before the split up. It is effectively Taiwan. If you want to see true Chinese culture these days, go to Taiwan, because that's where it all escaped to when it was all being slaughtered during the uprising, during the Mao Revolution. All the people who had all the cultural elements went over there. What you see now in China when you go there is a puppet show version of Chinese history. Fake temples, cardboard Buddha statues, it's BS. But the true history of the Chinese people still exists and is very beautiful and it's worth seeing culturally. But it's in Taiwan. Same thing is true of Russia and Ukraine. Ukraine is really the seat of what used to be like Russian personal interpersonal culture, not the governmental culture, but the interpersonal, what it's like to be a Russian or Ukrainian in terms of family meals and holidays and that kind of stuff. Is much more, it still exists in Russia, but it's definitely, there's more roots of it in the Ukrainian areas, left over anyways. Huge tracts of land, yeah. So, this setup and ongoing. This group has been ongoing for this entire. Okay, so the permanent council they set up, permanent joint council, dealing with this particular pact that was set up in '97, consulting on topics in Section 3 of this act and on any other political and security issues determined by mutual consent. Mutual consent includes sovereignty of all these countries and their ability to join or not join NATO, up to them, now and forever. You guys can put your guns down? Yes, we put our guns down. Okay, signing? We're signing? We're signing. Okay? I don't know why the fuck people are ignoring this particular document in all the conversations about NATO expansion stuff. Is this like, well, you got to understand. You got to understand. You got to understand. He's scared. Putin's scared, and with good reason. Because can you imagine if NATO wanted to put missiles on your border just because you pounded Chechnya with bombs and devastated the entire area and are spraying poison in the faces of your political enemies in parks in Germany and all throughout Europe and England, and you've just jailed your two main rivals, not because they are sock puppets for anyone else, but they are literally legit Russians who are running for office, and you will lose if you have to run against them. Because that's the other thing, is that Ukraine shut down some TV networks and they arrested their opposition. No, they didn't. They arrested the Russian sock puppets. These are the same people like Yanukovych who fled to Russia after because the other thing is, everybody who's defending, going, America backed a coup in 2014, that bullshit, that Aaron Mate, Jimmy Dore, horseshit, Glenn Greenwald, Max Blumenthal bullshit. They're pro-Yanukovych. That's just what they're avoiding saying, but that's what it is. They are pro-Yanukovych. The Yanukovych regime, which was pro-Russian, a sock puppet that was undermining every structure of Ukraine so that every citizen in Ukraine would go, this sucks, nothing runs right, let's go back to being part of Russia. That's what Yanukovych's fucking job was. And he failed at it, and the people drove him out, and before he could be impeached, he fled the country. He lives in Russia under Putin's protection. That's who these guys are for. Besides the fact that they're calling Zelensky a neo-Nazi when he's Jewish and the grandson of Holocaust survivors, beyond even that, these guys are pro-Yanukovych. They are for the Russian sock puppets. And I don't know if it's just some sort of like mistaken alliance with the USSR. Like, remember, they're still chafed over the collapse of the Soviet Union because communism good or socialism good. And so they're so entrenched in the idea of defending those two ideas that they have to defend the post-Cold War interests of the USSR, because if they do, they have to admit that version of it failed. It's really odd. So, David, they also gave Russia intel. We provided China before the invasion. China's not on our side on this. We knew they were going to give them the intel, though. Don't kid yourself. The info we gave China, we knew they were going to give to Russia. So we didn't give them all the info. Why would we? Do you think this, by the way, do you think Russia's invasion would be going this fucking poorly if we had given all the information we had out? So, Thanks for lurking and listening. I appreciate it. And thanks for the support, guys. Thanks for being part of this and showing up regularly just for, in the morning show and in the afternoon show. It's if it wasn't for this outlet, I would be screaming at my television about this document and nobody would be addressing it at fucking all. Okay. In building their relationship, NATO and Russia will focus on specific areas of mutual interest. They will consult and strive to cooperate to the broadest possible degree in the following areas. Issues of common interest related to security and stability in the Euro-Atlantic area or to concrete crises involving the contribution of NATO and Russia to security and stability in this area. Again, if UN says there's a problem, Bosnia-Herzegovina turns into a nuclear state run by an Iranian puppet and suddenly threatened, everybody joins together. That's the idea. Conflict prevention, including preventative diplomacy, crisis management, and conflict resolution, taking into account the role and responsibility of the UN, the OSCE, and the work of these organizations in these fields. Now, none of this, by the way, all of the invasions by Russia into Crimea, Donbass, and the regions around Moldova, all of that violates this, first and foremost. The fact that Russia invaded those areas, sent in troops, sent in arms, that kind of stuff, it was in violation of this. So the first violation came from Russia of this agreement. Joint operations, including peacekeeping operations on a case-by-case basis under the authority of the UN Security Council, participation of Russia in Euro-Atlantic Partnership Council, and the Partnership for Peace. Yes, that's right. There is and has been a partnership for peace. However strained and ice skating uphill this organization has been, it does exist. This isn't, everybody's like, we should have a Department of Peace. No one's ever thought of this before. It's been tried multiple times throughout history, and this is just another example. 1997. Exchange of information and consultation on strategy, defense policy, military doctrines of NATO and Russia, and budgets and infrastructure development programs. That's right. So we're going to help build some roads and bridges as well amongst each other. Arms control issues, nuclear safety issues across their full spectrum, which I think would rule out, I'm just saying this, Russia signing this document would rule out them firing on nuclear facilities. The full spectrum part might, I don't know, that seems, yeah. Preventing the proliferation of nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons and their delivery means, combating nuclear trafficking, and strengthening cooperation in specific arms control areas, including political and defense aspects of proliferation. Now, this was all about, and this is why NATO expansion and alignment, and why Russia, ultimately, by the way, if things had continued down this road, Russia would be part of NATO. Yeah, you heard that right. Because of Pakistan and India's nuclear possibility of having a war between the two of them, the warring between India and China, that kind of spread is something that the NATO alliance could actually include Russia in it in future if they had a liberal democracy where everybody was allowed to protest. That is a crazy idea, I know. Eventually, the idea is that Russia could join NATO if they wanted to, as an alliance. All right. Well, I mean, we can look into the NATO charter if you want to with this whole, like, NATO is taking over countries. Like, fuck off. You can contribute as much as you can, and you can agree to contribute as much as you can, but if you can't contribute, they make up the slack. For God's sake. Okay. Possible cooperation on theater missile defense. See what I mean? There was a concern that as the Pakistani government and the Indians were at war with each other, that they would expand into a nuclear standoff that might spread to Europe. And some of their errant missiles, depending on who's running Pakistan at the time, might end up in Europe. So, and they wouldn't just hit. I know everybody thinks that the West is responsible for all the problems in the world and therefore has the biggest bullseye on its back. But look, see Chechnya and Afghanistan and Syria and tell me that Russia doesn't have a target on its back, not just from Chechnya, but the ISIS-K and the East Turkestan independence movement that also hates China. They've got a target on their back from this shit too. All right. So they're like, you guys might want to actually join us with this. Okay. Enhanced regional air traffic safety. I mean, this is the normalized stuff. Like the FAA is the most important organization on the planet. honestly, without the United States Federal Aviation Authority and our standards throughout the world, 40% of the planes on Earth would fall out of the fucking sky every year. Seriously, we set the standard for the whole world. The FAA itself and the standards the U.S. made everyone else agree to is why people don't just die in plane crashes all the goddamn time. Your tax dollars at work. Do you have any idea how many lives American tax dollars have saved just by paying for the FAA? For the record. Okay. Increased transparency and predictability, mutual confidence regarding the size and roles of the conventional forces and member states of NATO and Russia. There you go. So transparency, predictability, and mutual confidence regarding the size and roles of conventional forces of member states of NATO and Russia. So the ones that are in there, we'll let you know basically where our troops and stuff are. You're going to know. I mean, if we view you as possibly hostile, we're going to want you to know, because the whole point of this is a bulwark. You know, keeping most of it secret doesn't work. You have to know, you have to brandish the weapon, or the weapon doesn't work in this particular situation. So of course they're going to let them know. There's not going to be, like, we're not going to surround you with subs. That's America's job, right? It's basically what NATO's saying. Coordinating a program of expanded cooperation between respective military establishments is further detailed below. Pursuing possible armaments-related cooperation through Association of Russia with NATO's Conference on National Armaments Directors, conversion of defense industries, developing mutually agreed, and by the way, that's their defense companies and our defense companies and Europe's defense companies working together eventually. So the idea that, like, we'll just sell weapons, so this is all about selling weapons. For fuck's sake, first of all, that belies the belief in true believers. Which is absurd. Developing mutually agreed cooperative projects in defense-related economic, environmental, and scientific fields, which is like the Paris Accord and other stuff like that. And NATO is a part of that because there's a lot of waste and damage environmentally that occurs because of NATO. Oh, thanks for the super chat, Benny Loco. Reminding everybody, by the way, to give a thumbs up, like, and subscribe. Conducting joint initiatives. Anyways, you guys can read this stuff. I posted it on there. The member states of NATO and Russia commit themselves to exercise restraint during the period of negotiation as foreseen in the document of scope and parameters. They have a whole other document about scope and parameters in relation to the current postures and capabilities of their conventional armed forces, in particular with respect to the level of forces and deployments in the treaty's area of application, in order to avoid developments in the security situation in Europe, diminishing the security of any state party, not just the NATO parties. Russia agreed to not diminish the sovereignty or the ability to defend themselves of any state party. This commitment is without prejudice to possible voluntary decisions by the individual state parties to reduce their force levels or deployments, or to their legitimate security interests. Here you go. There you go. This commitment is without prejudice, does not disallow or disavow any future changes, including them reducing their force levels and deployments, or to their legitimate security interests, which would mean increasing some of their security interests. And again, Russia signed this in 1997. Fuck off with this. NATO is the reason why he's going in. The reason why Putin is going in is because he always viewed these breakaway states as part of Russia, and getting them back under the fold is the entire plan. He's a true believer. A lot of comparisons have been made, though, about about him and Hitler, for example. The difference is, and why there's some sort of hope in this situation that response from the people might actually do something in Russia, is that Putin believes in the geographic integrity of Russia. He doesn't give a shit about the people in those terms. And Hitler essentially believed in Germanic genetic superiority. So the idea is that they would spread out all over the world, and basically the only people you'd see walking around the world were people of German descent. That was the plan. Putin is basically like isolating. He's pulled the zombie movie where you just take over the mall and secure the mall. And if we can just keep the zombies out, like that's his mentality, which is based on a level of paranoia about the rest of the world and in his own inadequacies. Because ultimately, what is this about? Russia, under Putin's leadership, has become an oil and gas kleptocracy. It doesn't produce anything worth a fuck. It doesn't. There's nobody out there who wants a Russian phone or a Russian washing machine or a Russian car that isn't Russian. That's just the truth. Like, they're not selling throughout Europe. They have nothing to offer under Putin. And so he has, I believe, sort of a fear of inadequacy as a world leader. He's a one-note leader. The only thing he does is oil and gas and theft. If you left it, he's not the leaders of, like the other leaders of Russia, that even though they had, their own true believer status around communism or socialism or the belief of the integrity of the USSR, at the same time could walk and chew gum and have a space program. They could have technological advancement. He can't. He doesn't get it, and it worries him. The only advances they've had at all technologically are in the security state and apparatus of Russia. And that's why, by the way, that Russia has more people in its internal security force than it has in its army. Same as China. There are more guns pointed at their own people than there are outside. Because that's the only skill he has as a leader. He can't, if Ukraine starts doing business with Europe and becomes a normalized member of Europe and starts innovating and showing how a functioning liberal democracy works that's integrated with the rest of the world and is, making its own sovereign decisions, then people are going to start asking why life sucks at home. So they've been undermining Ukraine for a long time, just, trying to destroy the government from the inside. And it failed. It didn't work. And then Trump came along and he was going to hand them it. He was going to recognize Crimea and all this stuff. And he was playing footsie with this and let Russia back into the G7 and all that. And then he lost. So the only choice left open is to invade. Because you got to do it now, because in 10 years, you'll have half as many soldiers. NATO and Russia signed this agreement in 1997. 6 years after the fall of the USSR. The agreement not to expand NATO only pertained to Germany during the negotiation to free East Berlin and East Germany from Russian control. And then a year later, the USSR ceased to be. Where are these assholes arguing that Germany should be two countries right now with half of it a satellite state of Russia? Because that's what that agreement was about. Yeah. Yeah, I put this on my Twitter feed if you guys want to follow at HAL SPARKS, and you can look at it. But again, this is old news. This has been around for a long time. Russia agreed to this. Russia agreed that they didn't really have a problem with NATO at that point after the Soviet Union was gone, and that the North American Treaty Organization, what am I saying? I'm trying to read and scroll at the same time. That NATO itself can exist because of other security concerns beyond Russia. I mean, ultimately, it became an enforcement arm of the war on terror within the borders of Europe to keep the push from, jihadis or revenge attacks or those kind of things from spreading through Europe. It was more akin to Interpol than of worry about Russia, until a paranoid asshole who used to be a spy, and spies live in a world of nails and believe their head is a hammer because that's their job. He's been trying to make the expansion of the world and the normalization of the world fit his narrow paranoid worldview that he had beaten into his head while he was growing up in the USSR. They need to destroy Ukraine and set it back 10 years and make it look weak and broken and awful because they can't stand the comparison. and the brain drain to Ukraine from Russia once they joined the EU in full trade is a nightmare for Putin's Russia. It's at that point, with Putin running things and what you're allowed to do versus what you're free to do, where would you rather live as a Russian-speaking scientist or technological innovator? If you're going to build a Silicon Valley and you don't want it absorbed by the state, Ukraine was where you were going to go. Yes, the Ukraine brain drain stays mainly on the plane. That is true, Carl. Thanks, Angie. I don't know why people don't bring this stuff up. It's like they just tear pages out of their fucking calendar and pretend time doesn't pass. Is there any kind of consequences to not complying with that agreement? Well, yes, ultimately, obviously that group that they set up is currently defunct. They're not coordinating with Russia about what they want to do to help Ukraine. That's gone. Russia repeatedly violated this, as soon as Putin took over. But this is an agreement, but that technically still stands. It's just Russia is not recognizing it anymore. Yeah. And so anybody who's telling you that poor Putin has no other choice is full of shit. They're ignoring this part of it beyond the fact that they're ignoring that we did not construct a coup in 2014. In 2013 and in 2012, Yanukovych, who was the sock puppet of the Russians, was still interested in making a lot of money because he's effectively an oligarch, and started playing footsie with EU normalization and getting trade going between the two. And Russia wasn't having it, so they shut it down. And so the people rose up and went, "You're fucking our jobs, you're destroying our economy, all for Mother Russia, and we're not under them anymore. We're a sovereign country." And that lasted a long time. And then Paul Manafort suggested, "Hey, why don't you set up some agent provocateurs, put some snipers in some buildings, and these guys can start trouble. These guys can finish it. You can shoot a bunch of protesters, and everybody will run away, and you'll be the strong man of Europe again. And then Russia will maintain control." Well, it didn't work out that way. And it's amazing that the people who supposedly support Antifa, for example, believe that the people in Ukraine who rose up against the Yanukovych regime who were effectively being anti-fascist at that point, crazy, that those people deserved it. Like they would be cool if the U.S. government under Trump had opened fire on BLM and Antifa people in Portland. If they'd set up snipers in the rooftops, on the rooftops, and fired into the Antifa crowd. What Aaron Mate and Jimmy Dore and Max Blumenthal and all these guys are saying is that would have been fine with them, because that's a reasonable response to that kind of uprising, which it fucking well isn't. But the idea is that all those people that rose up in Ukraine, those were all just American sock puppets who were pushing for the terrible ideas of liberal democracy and economic normalcy between Ukraine and the EU. Eek, right? Those crazy capitalists, right? Meanwhile, the Russian sock puppet government of Yanukovych, whose idea was to hire Paul Manafort and agree with him that snipers on rooftops shooting at protesters is a great fucking idea, that guy is the victim. That guy was the victim of an American coup. That the Ukrainian people are totally cool with that. That's why, by the way, that after a couple of cycles of trying to, move, like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, they finally elected somebody like Zelensky, who was normalizing relations with Europe again. And then all of a sudden, he's like, they're going to invade us, though. We're going to need some javelins because they're going to send tanks in. And Trump goes, "Yeah, you're going to have to do me a favor, though." And then ultimately was going to deny them. Literally had to give the money for these weapons because Congress had ordered it, and waited till like midnight of the last day that he could get away with it. By the way, delaying the money, therefore delaying the arms, therefore setting up a situation where in the following year, Russia could invade, because all the arms that we sent, they got to be signed off along the way. They got to be, requisitioned, ordered, and sold through. And there's all kinds of security apparatus in that, so they don't go to the wrong people, because we've made that mistake before. We're not going to make it again. And so that delayed those arms to Ukraine, and therefore Russia started this planning middle of last year, and then started moving troops in. And if Putin's plan looks rushed, it's because it was. He wasn't planning on having to do, like, rolling in and doing this stuff probably till later this year, with Trump in office, softening the blow. So, and by the way, the Kentucky Teachers Union money in Spurbank is fucking hysterical. Like, that storyline, I mean, that's my home state originally. No surprise that there's a lot of subterfuge going on around there. So Putin can do whatever he wants in his untouchable genius. Well, not necessarily. But Putin expected this to go easily. There is also a secondary thing, and I brought this up. I tweeted about this earlier, because people were talking about, there's a guy who is, let's see if I can find it real quick. Thanks for subscribing, by the way. Don't forget to like and subscribe. You have a thumbs up. And if you're a troll, please type something. Just don't type anything with any racial or anti-gay epithets in them, because that'll get you broomed out. I want you to stay because you help me with the algorithm, but I don't want you to just be an overt bigot. It makes your side look really bad. Just saying. Honestly, beyond just clowning, you look evil. And therefore, I just don't think it helps your case. You know what I mean? I'm trying to help you out. So, like and subscribe. You have a thumbs up, comment below, all that kind of stuff. So, I'm learning from Russell Brand how to create a thing. So, I should also post this in the YouTube description. That's a great idea. I will. As a matter of fact, if you're watching this later, I will post this document in the description below. Earlier today, there's a guy who posts stuff about the breakdown of, like, Russian gear. Like, he's showing basically how the stuff that Putin is sending in is shit. Like, it's garbage. It's just like I'm gonna find it real quick. But he made a where are we? He's pointing out that there's, like, dry rot in the tires, that these trucks that are getting caught in the mud, and these soldiers that don't know where they're going, or, are wandering around or running out of gas or any of this kind of stuff, is a sign that Putin doesn't know what he's doing. On the other hand, there is a strategic use of people like this, which is you send in all your rotten, shitty gear and your untrained soldiers first to absorb all the munitions of your enemy. It's a terrible strategy. It's been used multiple times in history. That's what cannon fodder means. They are sending in cannon fodder, holding the elite forces back, and then you let them go in and they destroy all the gear you would have just destroyed yourself, the old shit. And then the new shit follows in behind. Now, the problem he has is, if this was Chechnya, that would work. But it ain't. And all it ultimately did was give the US and the EU enough time to marshal gear and food and supplies and stuff to supply to Ukraine above and beyond what we already have given them. And no matter, and he was, again, this is also why he was counting on the delay of munitions from the United States caused by Trump would be enough for him to get in there, absorb what they had on hand, with just letting his soldiers get killed, letting his gear get blown up. Then when everybody goes, okay, we did it, then you roll in with the heavy shit and destroy everything. And that's, that was the plan. The problem is there was no secondary delay, because Biden won and our posture changed, and you don't have, the people like, Paul Manafort was initially there to undermine the RNC platform so we don't give lethal support to Ukraine. Trump's big thing all week has been saying, Obama gave them pillows and blankets and I gave them missiles. Okay, no, you didn't. Congress gave them the javelins and the Stinger missiles, not you. Trump delayed Congress's order to give that to Ukraine. Also, the order to give them lethal materials came after Zelensky was elected and the government had stabilized and they had moved towards, they'd done a lot of anti-corruption work. When Obama gave them pillows and blankets, it was when they were being run by Russian sock puppets. And every time we gave them aid in terms of weapons, those weapons would end up being turned on the Ukrainian people. Right. You believe Trump should be held accountable? He is and will be. I got a YouTube recommendation for Russell Brand the other day. Nixon, oh, thank you. Yes, comrade by Pillow Guy. Yay! Thanks for the coffee. I appreciate it. I have not had any this morning. Let me find this. I want to find this one guy's feed. It's in there. I'll find it because there's so much intel that's coming in just from on the, everybody's talking about how U.S. intel these days is all coming from like open source intel, OSINT. If you look at that, OSINT, if you see that showing up, that is people tweeting pictures of a crime scene, of a war. Like showing that information, which people, if you look at an old spy movie from the 80s, like the idea of having a picture of a tank or a truck driving down the road was incredibly useful intel. Like, oh my God, that's where it is. We can even tell geographically where it is, especially with a cell phone with, geolocating on it. Like you take a picture and it's in the cloud like that. That kind of technology kings would have murdered for is in every phone right now. And so there's this big story about how open source intelligence, 80% of intelligence comes from open source stuff, which is true. But because it's open source, the other side knows what is known, right? So the 20% is still really important. The 80% has expanded over time, but the 20% has gotten more and more crucial. So you can't just rule that part of it out, okay? And also, where is this? Oh yeah, here we go. I found it. So open this guy up. So I tweeted this earlier today. Hold on. Earlier today as well. This guy, Trent Talenko, is going, all right, here is another mud truck maintenance post. Look at the tires in the video immediately under the wheel hubs. That is oil from the wheel hubs leaking onto those tires from the hub to the ground. The seals on those wheel hubs have failed due to dry rot. One of two. And then he goes down here. One or more of those Panther S1 wheel assemblies have seized from a lack of lubrication because of leaks through the dry rotted seals. It takes about a year of not moving a vehicle for that to happen. Those poor Russian conscripts are so screwed. Right. So they're being given these shit vehicles. Here's some more bad bearings, rotted tires, that kind of stuff. All true. However, this is the point that I made, which was there's a logical reason for this. Putin could be sending useless gear and soldiers he'd used as cannon fodder ahead to use up enemy munitions, then following with functioning forces. He wouldn't be the first monster to use this tactic, was my argument. Also, Right Wing Cope showed this earlier. RT has been shut down in the United States, or have shut themselves down. They weren't closed by the U.S. government. They packed up and left because they're not making any money. They're not going to get any ad rev, and they can't pay their employees because the ruble just doesn't go as far as it used to. So meanwhile, who's on TV on RT as they're packing and leaving? Yep, there he is. Jimmy just protecting them. Oh, it's fun. So the concern I have is that Putin knows this and is sending his own people to die. And again, did you guys see the? And again, you got to take all this stuff with a grain of salt. Whoops, cream. I can spell. There you go. That Russia has been sending. Here it is. Russia has been sending into battle, and I mentioned this before, vehicle-mounted crematoriums to get rid of soldiers' bodies. So they're just delivering urns instead of coffins because coffins look bad. A bunch of urns, you know, you squint, you don't know what it is. But the idea is that they're going to get rid of their own troops this way, and if they blow up a car with some civilians in it and they happen upon it and nobody's around, just chuck the family in there and burn them up and throw the dust on the ground beside the road. No one will ever find them. I mean, if there's a question as to where I said the Ukraine, because I was saying the Ukrainian conflict. And then sometimes I bail out and I do that. Thank you for correcting me, Robert. It is Ukraine, not the Ukraine. That if there's a bunch of people missing at the end of this nonsense, this hateful, belligerent bullshit from Russia, more than likely this is where they went if they weren't consumed in a fire, or a blown up building. Just, not enough of them left to identify. This is where they went. I mean, can you imagine being a German in World War II and going, oh, if only we had these things? I mean, it's Auschwitz on wheels, effectively. And that's like, on the one hand, they're saying this is about, cremating their own soldiers. Rookies, by the way, in this story in Yahoo is about Russia using beatings to force their soldiers into doing this. There is an aspect of this that is about just hiding the cost of war from the Russian people. And as this is just friggin' horrifying. And the issue is, again, is it just for the soldiers? Now, the Russian bots are out in force going, this is propaganda, this is propaganda. And is there a chance that this is a Russian gear, but it's not deployed as yet or whatever? Very possibly. But the idea that this thing is out there as part of gear is insanity. There is no situation where an EU country, a NATO country, or the United States throws a mobile crematorium in as part of their gear. Ben Wallace, the defense secretary, suggests the vehicle-mounted incinerators will be used to hide evidence of battlefield casualties. Not just theirs. So this is, and again, this story, I am completely open to this becoming bullshit later. But it is absolutely in line with the strategy so far. New road signs for Russian army in Ukraine. Coffins, crematorium, sacks. That's crazy. I keep seeing this one. I don't know if these are photoshopped or they're actually physically made. They look photoshopped to me. But still, that's fine. But this in and of itself is just horrifying. And again, post-Iraq invasion lead up, which I protested against, I know a lot of you did, we're very reluctant to buy some of the stories that come out, especially Iraq 1 and 2, to buy some of the news stories that come out. And that's reasonable. So I think it's all right to keep your powder dry and hold, look, I'm talking like Steve Bannon with military stuff, but to hold your argument about these kind of things until all the information comes in. There's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with being dubious about these claims up to a certain point. That said, considering that the Amnesty International, the EU, the Ukrainians are marking the Russian death toll so far of soldiers at around 8,000, and Russia's saying 700. And even if the number is a mix between the two, that means Russia is hiding, somewhere in the order of 3,500 dead soldiers from their public. And you don't do that when you got coffins coming off. We have dignified transfers in the United States for this very reason, so that the commander-in-chief and the American people are aware of the cost of war. Once you eliminate that, or you don't bother to bring them home, you set up a situation where your own people are blind to the cost, and therefore the death toll is wholly the enemy, and therefore everything is justified. Oh, the other one was that came out today was this one was Robert O'Neill put this out. Russian energy, money, Biden, fueling thing, American energy, shut down by executive order Biden. And he goes, tell me I'm wrong. You guys who watch the show, we've covered this so many goddamn times. Biden gave out 3,329 leases in his first year. Trump gave out 2,700 and something. The Biden executive order on oil and gas leases were a 90-day review to make sure that environmental concerns have been taken into account, and that Trump didn't just give some of them away to buddies in Texas and other places to feather his nest post-presidency. They didn't trust him. And they were right to. Some of them were rejected for that very reason. The only ones that have still held were the ones on offshore drilling, because they didn't take into account the environmental impact on fisheries. And so there's this fight between this federal Trump-appointed judge and those leases. He made them release them, and then the Biden administration is fighting those again. But they've opened more in Wyoming and Nevada and other places where there aren't going to be environmental impacts that damage our aquifers in other places. They're choosing them important. So I made that up. The other thing is Keystone XL pipeline is Canadian oil. It's Canadian oil that goes out to the world market. We don't have first dibs. We don't have first choice. We don't get a discount because it's a neighbor. For all the shit talking about the tyranny of Canada and how Canada they've been lying to us and we never got one red cent from them, and they always cheat us on tariffs, and our allies are worse than our enemies that Trump talked about, including Canada. All of a sudden, Canadian tar sands oil going over the Great Lakes and through the Great Lakes is a great idea. Get fucked. That's nonsense. And also, the U.S. government does not purchase Russian oil. Private companies do. BP, Exxon, Shell, they buy them. They refine them. It's on the open market. They can get it for cheap. That's where they're buying it. If you want a moratorium on Russian oil entirely, then what you'll do is, you'll send all of it to Russia and you'll jack the price up worldwide. I mean, all of it to China, rather. You'll send all of it to China and jack the price up worldwide. China will get it at a discount to some degree because of security assurances on their eastern border, on Russia's eastern border. But it won't change a thing. And the coffers, by the way, they can sell this for all they want, but their ruble isn't worth shit, and their central bank isn't going anywhere. And we're not trying to kill the Russian people. This is about punishing Russian oligarchs and Putin himself, and making the economy of Russia a pariah temporarily, not gutting it so that the people starve. So there are steps to be taken. Eventually, I don't doubt that if he keeps up with this, or they encircle Kyiv and start ground and pound, then we're going to probably cut off Russian oil, period. But we're going to do it as a united force. It's not going to be the Americans deciding to do it or EU deciding to do it by themselves. It's going to be everybody. And before that happens, we're going to get either OPEC or Qatar or some of these other countries, or cause division in OPEC, which would be kind of a silver lining of this shit, to start producing more against the will of the Saudis. Yeah. And by the way, the price of oil and gas in the United States is lower than it was in 2014. And I don't remember in 2014, I remember a Russian invasion, but I don't remember a pandemic in 2013. So anyways, this is nonsense. And so everybody following, Biden was ordered by the courts to give them out, which he wasn't. I don't want to go through and read all my tweets. You can go look at this. Eventually, I just stopped bothering with this bullshit because you got people just repeating the Fox talking points. She's like, when we were a next exporter, she meant net, but you know, autofill, we can forget that. Our costs were much lower. We are once again a net importer. No, we are not. We are energy independent currently. Our companies are importing Russian oil because it's fucking cheap right now. That's why. But again, go protest outside Exxon and Shell's offices. Knock yourself out. What's the lowest denomination of the ruble? The ruble. Lucius. Yeah, the lowest version of the ruble right now is the actual ruble. Thanks, John. I hope the trolls are paying attention too, you know. I know they're not. But again, I don't need the trolls to agree with me for this. I just need them to know that they're never going to get the 97 NATO-Russia mutual agreement out of their heads when they tell another lie. The next time they try to lie about NATO expansion and this isn't Putin's fault and all this kind of stuff, if they watch this, they can't bullshit themselves into thinking, I've never heard of the 97 agreement. That's always going to be in there, living rent-free in their heads. As is the fact that Biden handed out 34% more leases. You could say, well, the courts made him. Well, that would be parity. That would be 1-to-1. But why would there be 34% more leases under Biden? If they made him do these, why add on to the top? Unless you were the temporary pause was exactly what I said it was. So they have to deal with the fact that Biden has released 34% more leases on public lands than Trump has also, by the way, shored up wind farms and solar farms at an increasing clip to match that so we can get to net zero and meet our targets. And then, of course, most of the oil and gas exploration, natural gas being a byproduct of oil, providing us more of our energy over time and releasing less carbon into the atmosphere as we transition in that direction, the oil being sold on the open market and largely used to make plastics. So there you go. Yeah, they can't honestly stop thinking about that. Hear that, trolls? Do you see me? Look into my eyes. Look into my beautiful brown eyes. And remember that Biden's handed out 34% more leases for oil and gas in his first year of his presidency than Trump did. He got us out of Afghanistan, which Trump promised and never did. He supplied Ukraine with Stinger missiles and with javelins when Trump tried to stop it, even after Congress ordered them released. And then, of course, did I mention we're out of Afghanistan? Oh, I did mention that. Oh, and then NATO 97 signed an agreement with Russia that it was okay for other countries to expand in NATO because they had aligned threats that they were concerned about. I'm just letting it, letting those seeds fall into that fertile ground in your brain and grow into stalks that maybe, just maybe at some point you won't be so dedicated to thinking America sucks so bad that it doesn't matter unless Trump is running it. That maybe, just maybe, you can understand that I'll argue with conservatives and your political side of the aisle about what I think are the best policies in any situation. But I will never dehumanize you in the process as much as you might try to dehumanize yourselves. And that turning this country into a Trumpian monarchy is antithetical to our Constitution, is a tantamount to burning the flag and shredding the Constitution, and I don't know why you want to do it. I don't know why you think America is garbage unless Trump is at the helm. Because it ain't. PS jobs report. That's the other thing. Oh my God. Big Biden boom. The big Biden boom. Biden big bada boom. That's been hashtagging all morning. Kind of spectacular. This has got to be rough. I mean, all we're going to hear about today, clearly in, let's see if I can move this up, make it a little, move this up, make it a little bigger. Yeah, there you go. 678,000 jobs added. Another gain underscore the economy's solid health as the Omicron wave fades and more Americans venture out to spend at restaurants, shops, and hotels despite surging inflation. Because there's compensatory rises in the economy and there's more money to be made elsewhere because we're the only major consumer economy on the planet right now. And we're going to be for the next 30 years unless something changes. Unless Trump fucks it up. Unless they hand it over and they just flush it down the toilet. Labor Department's report Friday also showed that the unemployment rate dropped from 4% to 3.8%, extending a sharp drop in joblessness as the economy has rebounded from the pandemic recession. By the way, you do realize that in the Republican response to the SOTU, every single Republican response to the SOTU, whoever it was, from Marjorie Taylor Greene to the official one, they all said that Americans are being paid not to work right now, and that these lazy bastards in America won't go back to get a job anytime soon, even though we're at 3.8%. Okay. Average hourly pay barely rose last month, but has increased 5.1% in the last year. So that there's been a 5% pay raise in the last year. Again, 7% inflation, year over year, still in the throes of this pre-Delta, but still in the throes of COVID. And yet the pay raises, inflation can come and go. It can fade, that you can make monetary policy that will raise and lower it, but the pay raises are going to stick around. A sign that companies feel compelled to raise wages to attract and keep workers. What a terrible concept. Many employers, in turn, have been raising prices to offset their high labor costs, a process that has fueled inflation. Those bloody people raising their wages and then it costing them more money to actually do business, so they're slightly raising their prices. So it's, Consumer inflation has reached its highest level since 1982, year over year, squeezing America's households and businesses with price spikes, especially high for such necessities as food, gasoline, and rent. First of all, rent hasn't changed in most places except like in Texas, where they apparently thought this giant wave was coming from California, so they jacked them the fuck up everywhere. Gasoline itself, again, an international commodity that because of what's going on in Russia and Ukraine and other regions and the inability to transport it worldwide because of the slow roll back to normal post-COVID has created supply shock, has added that cost to it. And food has to be transported. That's why local food costs have not gone up. In response, the Federal Reserve is set to raise interest rates several times this year, but beginning later this month, they're not going to. They're going to roll that back because they're basing it on a monetary policy that pretends that 2020 didn't happen. Those increases will eventually mean higher borrowing rates for consumers, businesses. No, they won't. Chair Jerome Powell said this week that he plans to propose that the Fed raise its benchmark short-term rate by a quarter point when it meets in about 2 weeks. They were talking about a half point. It's not going to happen. Powell has acknowledged that high inflation has proved more persistent and spread more broadly than he and many economists expected. That's because it's not based on monetary policy. It's based on supply shock, dum-dum. It's the result of reality on the ground, not because of money changing hands. Good Lord. But in the meantime, oh boy, Fox is going to be all CRT today. And how Trump really saved Russia. This would not have happened if Russia would not have invaded Ukraine if I was still president, because I would have given it to them. They could just have it. Who invades their own Christmas presents? Inflation is on the rise, equivalent to corporate profit records. Yeah, but also corporate costs. Biden should focus on housing, build tons of units. We need supply bad. I agree, Robert, but that's not something the federal government can do. That's a state-oriented thing. That's the problem. And adding that to, like, there's this what you can do, what people are asking for scale that exists, and it's always going to be tipped towards what people are asking for in government. You're always going to have more weight on that side. And the worst thing you can do is throw more weight on that side when it is opposite of what you can do. And the federal government, there's some housing expansion that they can do in terms of like housing around military bases, for example. They can expand in those areas, but we're not going to have a situation where the federal government is seizing lands and building houses. It's not going to happen. States have to do it. And the federal government has given them funding in the rescue package to do just that. That's why California ordered Los Angeles to build 250,000 units in the next couple of years. That's something that I, as mayor, would be for. And yet there's a lot of pushback because it lowers they believe it will lower the value of houses because the volume will do that. But only in rental properties, which in large part are places where oligarchs the world over hide their money, is in U.S. rental properties. That's one area where the federal government can do something. And that's believe me, that this group in the DOJ that Biden has set up that's going to hunt down Russian money hidden in the U.S. economy, guess what? Get ready for LA Times and New York Times and Chicago Sun-Times and Seattle Times and all these, and San Francisco Time, the Herald or whatever it is there, to start running stories over the next 8 months about an entire apartment block owned by a Russian oligarch that has been half empty and the rents have been through the roof in the other half of the units, like above market value, which has been artificially raising the prices of rental costs in the area in coordination with another oligarch who owns the building next door. That is absolutely going on right now in the United States. It's terrible in Los Angeles. It's a lot of Chinese millionaires trying to hide their money from the CCP, so they buy properties, like shuffling money through Japan using Bitcoin for a while. That was their primary way of doing it. Transferring it, turning it into U.S. funds, buying apartment buildings and office buildings in downtown Los Angeles and leaving them empty because they don't want to do anything with them because they can sell them later untouched and they won't have to run anybody out. So they have lots of options in terms of getting rid of the property quickly if nobody's in them. So they basically jack the costs up so high that nobody would be. If you go downtown, there's a shit ton of buildings where the majority of them are empty because nobody can afford the rent. Well, how does that make any fucking sense? Unless it is simply a place where you are parking money in real estate and you don't care if you make money on it. You bought it with cash. Yeah, it's nothing new. Yeah, it's been around for a long time. The only difference is now attention's going to be on it. Yeah. Oh yeah, Santa Cruz. They're like a lot of really nice places, especially downtown areas where you're like, Jesus, why are all the downtown areas out of business? Why is it so fucking expensive? Why is this retail shop in this podunk fucking town so expensive? Well, because it's owned by a Russian syndicate of real estate investors who have no interest in anybody being in it, because if they need to liquidate it tomorrow, they don't want to deal with people. And the American laws are such that you'd have to. You don't have, there's no fear of eventually, someplace going rent controlled if the building never had any fucking people in it to begin with. So you start brooming everybody out. It's happened in a bunch of cities and it's got to end. And one of the ways it's got to end is that ownership of property in the United States should be viewable. The idea that if you or I own a house, it's on a registry. Our name is attached to it. But if an LLC is formed to buy a series of properties, nobody knows who owns that LLC or who's part of it. That's insane. That is a dual track legal system right there. Yeah, those are month-to-month messes, no warnings, and you're out. Right, because they need to clear it. We need transparency on private property ownership in the United States. That's how you know. Again, this goes to Biden's conversation about, he goes, I'm a capitalist, but capitalism without competition is not capitalism. It's exploitation. The same thing is true with real estate. And that's the one area where everybody can hide their fucking holdings. And foreigners figured this out a long time ago. Foreign oligarchs figured this out a long time ago, that comparatively, the cost of real estate in the United States is cheap compared to other places, and it is a rock-solid investment you can sit on as long as nobody uses it. So they're creating ghost buildings in these major cities, and then month-to-monthing everybody else in it so that they can just purge if they need hot cash today. So that's got to end. And like I said, you're going to see stories about that. I mean, there's been a few over the last few years, and it started gaining ground as a story. But the DOJ investigative unit that Biden set up to chase down this Russian money, that's what they're going to find. And that's why the New York DA's office is going to be busy as fuck coordinating with the DOJ, getting rid of these assholes. If you don't believe me, look at the mid floors in Trump Tower, where the Russians had a couple of floors where they were running gambling and prostitution, human trafficking and money laundering out of that building. And you think that asshole who wanted to meet with everybody in his building before they bought something didn't know? Piss off. Your rent went up 200% in 2 years? Good Lord. How's it? What? Did you move? Let's see. Hal, I have a question. What is 3 times 5 plus 3x plus 5 equals 17? What is the answer? I have no idea. 3x plus 5 equals 17. Oh, I see. What's x in that situation? It'd be fractional, wouldn't it? Yes, ghost buildings, boo. Right. Anyway, so this is big Biden boom, big Biden boom, big Biden boom, big Biden boom, multipass, Lilu Dalit's multipass. So this is this would be something that normally, like, the Republicans could even come out and say, this is the American people doing this, right? They could come out and celebrate that, we're getting back to work and the American ingenuity and blah, 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 but they're not. They're not. All their statements are about how Americans are lazy and given half a chance, they'd love to, sit at home and get a government check and not do anything, because that's their opinion of the American people. Not the fact that we are and have been the driving ingenious force of most of the technological advancement of the planet for the last 5 decades, not because we're forced to, because we want to. And I believe that's true of most human beings on the planet. That's why I'm for democracy. That's why I'm for specifically liberal democracies, where you can disagree. It's also why I don't believe that the country is divided as they say, and why Russia and other countries that are autocracies and are run by dictators feel the need to fill social media with trolls and bots saying that we are divided and making us more divided and feeding that division, because they can't compete with the United States. They can't do it any more than they could compete with a free and open Ukraine. And I tweeted this earlier, but this is kind of amazing. America, Putin has lost more soldiers in 8 days than the U.S. lost in Iraq and Afghanistan in 20 years. Just gather that for a moment. And again, we're supposed to believe that Putin is the strong leader, and that we should be more like him. We should want a leader more like him. We should be more like him as people. That's the argument from the Tucker Carlsons of the world. That's the argument from the Jimmy Dores of the world. That's the good side. the guy who just lost 8,000 of his own soldiers and parked, in a long armored convoy, bringing nothing but death into another country, and amongst them allegedly crematoriums, so that they don't even have to show the people at home how many of their soldiers have died. Forget the fact that Trump, and I know this will upset some of the maggots, Trump only went to 4 of the 92 dignified transfers that happened during his presidency. 4 of the 92. Of the 92 dignified transfers of dead soldiers and servicemen and women that came back from the front lines in Afghanistan and Iraq and other places and died in accidents, all the things that when a body is brought back, when a soldier or service member has died, the dignified transfer that they receive, there were 92 of them during the Trump presidency. Trump went to 4 of them. He stopped going after one parent said, "I blame you for the death of my son." After the 4th dignified transfer, one of them went, "I blame you, this is your fault." So Trump stopped going. And again, that's yet another thing. Put that in the Trump spank bank, maggots and trolls. Live with that for a while. Go look up that detail. Know that it's true. Know that there's no way around it. Know that there's no way to excuse it. He stopped going. He didn't give a shit. He stopped. Biden's gone to all of them, and they're like, he was looking at his watch. He was touching his rosary, but fine. Still there, though. Marjorie Taylor Greene, or Boebert, I forget which one, I mixed them up, said that one of her constituencies said that she blames Biden for the death of her son. That's part and parcel to being president of the United States. They take on that responsibility. It's why it's a big job. Biden will go to, even after that, the next dignified transfer. He'll be there if we have to have one. He'll be there. Biden's going to go. Trump, after somebody said that about him, stopped going. And that's okay with you. That's hey man, that's what makes him a strong leader. That's what makes him your guy. He's better than the United States as a whole. As a matter of fact, without him in charge, America is a whole. And you can, I don't know how you explain that to yourself. I'm always amazed by that. How many more were there? What do you mean? There were how many more deaths? There were 64 deaths in Afghanistan during the Trump administration. I also count the 13 that died because of the ISIS bomber on our way out as part of the Trump death toll, because there would not have been a crush at the airport if he had pre-evacuated embassy staff and all those folks like he should have when he set the date for us to leave. He didn't bring down the embassy staff or any of the SIV people or any of the military post the Bagram tightening. He didn't move any of the civilians out before that. He just set the date and fucked off. And after he lost the election, he just stopped presidenting. He didn't do any of the homework. That's why there was a crush at the airport. That's why ISIS-K attacked. They attacked the civilian side, by the way, where our soldiers were protecting Afghan civilians on the civilian side of the airport that were leaving to go to other places. Because they did it with dignity, and they were serving, people trying to escape a war zone and be free. They died honorably. And to sully their memory like that, where Trump's constantly saying that our troops surrendered to guys with knives and bullshit, which he's said all the time. It's just gross. Like, I'll get riled up if I start talking about it. But it's amazing to me that, the Republicans can't enjoy, they're too stupid politically to even find a way to support the jobs numbers because they're afraid it will get Biden credit. And that's what they accused, everybody on the left of doing during the Trump years. Anything good happens, we can't talk about it because it'll give Trump credit, right? That was the worry. But they were always like the tax cut. I'm like, well, it's a temporary tax cut for people and a permanent one for corporations. Pardon me if I'm not jumping through my shirt. I just don't get how they go, of course we've got great job numbers. The American people are strong, but we could be a lot stronger without this idiot at the helm. Like, how hard is that? Just say that. You can still shit on Biden without shitting on America at the same time, without shitting on your own constituents, without saying that the American people at base are grotesque, weak, uncreative, not innovative, because that's what they're saying. It's weird. And I don't understand. I don't get it. I do love, though, how much apparently, because I didn't name check any of the people. Like this one, like look how much play this has got. I mean, it's not a lot, and I don't honestly care. But this is the tweet that I tweeted about. Dor and Aaron Mate, who he had on his show, and Russell Brand and Glenn Greenwald about the America backed a coup in 2014. That they used that recording. And in the afternoon show today, I'll play that recording so we can look at what they're using as a way to defend themselves. And it's pitiful. It's pathetic. Not only is it a highly edited audio released by Russia to push back against the free people of Ukraine standing up and deposing Yanukovych, to try and make it look like, this is all the U.S. is doing. Never mind the fact that it's heavily edited and only a segment released, which, it's Russia. Why would you trust them? They obviously are just trying to show you, they don't want you to waste your time. They want you to use your time wisely. You're a busy person, American. All you need to know, or European, or everybody else in the world, you need to know that the U.S. is creating a sock puppet government in Ukraine, but you just need the basics. You just need the beats. You don't need to hear all the murky stuff that waters down the argument. You need to hear it. Right. All right. So that bullshit. So they've been pushing this, and Dor had on Aaron Mate and Max Blumenthal to float this bullshit, and basically race to the defense of Putin. And Jimmy's big line right now, nonstop, is they're neo-Nazis. The whole government's neo-Nazis. They're all run by neo-Nazis. It's amazing. The Russians have even captured some neo-Nazis and are showing them on photo. It's almost as if the Russians knew exactly where the neo-Nazis are, as if they drove them there and dropped them off. Of course, the Russians have been fomenting neo-Nazis inside Ukraine, the same way they did with France, the same thing they did with Germany, the same thing that was done in the United States of America. They're funding and feeding these neo-Nazi movements in a bunch of countries to undermine democracies from within. And then they, like Trump's voter fraud, can point to it and go, we know exactly where the neo-Nazis are. Well, yeah, because you fucking put them there. You've been paying them. They're at the check cashing place where they get money from you. That the same as Trump's like, I know where all the voter fraud is. Well, yeah, because it's yours. You just lost. So now that you've lost, you're like, tell them, since they can't figure out where the fake votes, who they went for because there's no signatures, just tell them the winner must have gotten the fraud. Why? Well, because the loser never cheats. Really? Really? The loser never cheats and loses anyways? That doesn't happen? There was cheating. Yes, we know. You did it. That's why every time you try to look at a Republican-run state at the fraud, they go, don't look, don't look, don't look. And when you finally look, you find a bunch of Biden votes that weren't counted and a bunch of Trump votes that shouldn't have been. Every time they look, they find more Biden votes. Why is that? Because any of the fraud that occurred was helping Trump. That's the same reason Putin knows where all the neo-Nazis are. There's neo-Nazis. This guy's a neo-Nazi. This guy's a neo-Nazi. How do you know? Met with him personally. It's almost like a version of the old Bill Hicks joke, but sort of inverted in terms of Putin. Like, how do you know they're neo-Nazis? I looked at the receipt. Anyway, so I made up this thing that, like, it was dumb before and it was emerged. And it's like the amounts of, like, bots that are jumping in here are hilarious. And then, the sort of back and forth fight about it. Apparently, I guess I'm not being ratioed. If you feel like liking that one, I guess it would give me a boost against them trying to ratio me with the number of comments. Although the number of comments, I've never understood that. Like, because the whole point of Twitter, it seems, is to start a conversation and keep one going, that you would want this number bigger than these, than people that just forward it or like it. You'd want responses, right? Driving a conversation, right? But even still, I'm still fine. But in terms of that, it doesn't even work. Anyways, yes, good idea. Thanks for reminding me to reset. It's HAL Sparks Mornings, Mega Worldwide. I did this Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And then the afternoon show is at 3 o'clock Pacific time. Normally, today it will be a little earlier because I have a show tonight and I'm on East Coast time, so it's hard to... Oh, thanks for subscribing. Yeah, don't forget to subscribe on Twitch, you guys. Twitch.tv/HalSparks. Support the show. If you have Amazon Prime, it doesn't cost you a dime. My other favorite thing. This is a good conversation to have. My other favorite thing right now is about oligarchs. These oligarchs, their oligarchs, our oligarchs, everybody's got an oligarch. Whereas the argument is that Russian oligarchs and American oligarchs and I guess French and UK and Canadian oligarchs, samey same. That we have oligarchs and they have oligarchs and it's a lot of oligarchy going on. And the argument is that they're like aluminum magnate who has sent death squads into areas to kill people. And I don't mean like in the abstract, like you read this in a story, like mow down people to claim aluminum mines. An oligarch in Russia who does that is the same as Jeff Bezos, because Jeff Bezos is stupid rich and he started with an online bookstore that became Amazon that you use. Now, we all use aluminum too, but not from that guy. Russia uses that aluminum. And if you're saying that oligarch just means rich and connected, then it's a meaningless phrase. Because there's good reasons to be rich and connected, and there's bad reasons to be rich and connected, right? One would think. If you're rich and connected, but it's not because you're rich, or you're rich and connected only because you're rich, those would be two different things. If you were connected and then you became rich, that's a little squirrely. If you were rich and then you became connected, that seems like normal, right? You would go like, you know, either funding elections or giving money to candidates or ideas you support because you're either rich and you want to stay that way, or because you're rich and you want other people to be able to get rich just like you. That's a different reason. That's not the same thing, right? Those are different people. That's a different thought form. And so the oligarchs that feed into keeping Putin in charge for multiple decades seem to me to be different than the people who support American democracy, whatever side they're on, by supporting candidates of their choosing and yet not trying to stop elections from happening. That would be the thing. Right? Oh, thanks for the super chat. Thank you very much. So an oligarch isn't just someone who's rich and connected, I would think. I think an oligarch would be someone who has abject control over a government due to their wealth and connection. That they are effectively a de facto cabinet member in control of a government beyond the will of the American people or the Russian people or the Ukrainian people or whatever, right? That would make sense. That would be an oligarch to me. Now, there's this illusion that we have oligarchs in this country because anybody who doesn't get what they want suddenly screams that the person in control of whatever it is an oligarch. Therefore, the biggest argument is the big tech oligarchs, right? That became the term. That, like, the big tech oligarchs are stopping us from blah, blah, blah. Now, these big tech oligarchs that allegedly exist created social media platforms that a lot of people use, and there are multiple versions of them. And you can leave if it was ever strangling what you could say. But at no point was there ever an expectation, any more than you would expect that they would allow Stormfront or neo-Nazi groups to post, or jihadis to post beheading videos. Like, everybody just writes that off immediately. Of course they're not going to do that. And so there's going to be an absolute cutoff, and then there's going to be a gray area in them running their company. And they can decide whether they want to be the Hallmark Channel or Cinemax. OnlyFans being the Cinemax, and YouTube for Kids being the Hallmark Channel, right? These are, and in them, the rules of what you can put on there and what you cannot. And they will set those rules. And if you want to be in those situations, you can use them. Now, this idea that they should be public utilities, which is what Republicans have also floated, while at the same time saying Venezuela is hell and we should never want that, is always like, that kind of magical thinking to me is so bizarre. That, yeah, no. I mean, when Venezuela seized the oil and gas industry and seized the control of media groups and told them what they could say empirically, that bad. But if Trump did it, that good. And again, in terms of Twitter, what are the Republicans asking for? When Trump got kicked off of Twitter, what were they asking for at the time? That the federal government should force a private company to carry the words of elected leaders, whether they want to or not. That elected leaders in the United States of America have primacy on any social media network, and therefore, I guess, extrapolated out to any group gathering. That the president gets a free ticket to anything they want to come to, and that you have a responsibility to let them in with their entire Secret Service entourage, make space for them. If he rolls in, I mean, is that what you're asking for? Because that seems to be what the Republicans are asking for. And sorry, but that's not how the United States runs. And it used to be something that they were all in on. Republicans used to be 100% all in on the idea that a private company does not have to do anything the government tells them to do. Imagine if Nancy Pelosi, so Trump wins his, the electoral counters go back to the states. The judges, they go back to the states. We have to have a whole new election. And Nancy Pelosi becomes president. And Nancy Pelosi decides by fiat that every diner in the United States must put up pictures of her and whatever her statement of the day is. That is private restaurants where people gather, the federal government has the right to force them to put up some picture and a fortune cookie phrase from her every single day for whatever she wants to tell the American people. They have a responsibility to do this. They have no right, they have no say in it, and if they disagree with it, they can't take it down. Do you think Republicans would be for this? I don't. I don't understand how they don't gather the legal slippery slope that is part of this, because that's what it is. Yeah, they're arguing for a North Korean system. They're arguing for Saddam Hussein's picture on every billboard. And as an American, this might shock you, I'm against that. I believe that any business should have to serve any customer regardless of race, sex, gender identity, their sexual preference, their any all the immutable characteristics of their person should never be able to be a reason to exclude them from a business. And the reason for this is their tax dollars accumulatively throughout the city and the state and the federal government keep the roads and the street lights and the weather systems and the dams and the breakwaters and all that stuff sound so that business can continue to function. So no taxpayer in a situation where we all have taxation with representation should have a limit on where they are free in the United States, because we all equally share in the output of taxes. That's why. And if you want to live on your own homemade road, with your own homemade business and not deal with the American taxpayer equally, who is equally protected under the law as a citizen of the United States, don't build a business in the United States of America. There are plenty of places in the world where you can find a dusty road and build a cake shop and never have to serve anybody except the dudes in a truck with AK-47s that roll up every 3 months to take your money. So, because we all pay taxes equally and because we all benefit equally from the fact that we have street lights and functioning streets and all the apparatus, smart grid, and all the apparatus of an electrical grid in the city, because the possibility for you to even pay your electrical bill exists because we as taxpayers keep an electrical grid functioning as a necessary part of a functioning society. Because you benefit from that, you cannot deny anybody else who's a member of that society from your place of business. You don't have to do your best work. I'm not asking you to be inspired, but you're going to have to let them in. That said, in the inverse, there is no point where simply because you are part of the citizenry of the United States, that any elected official can force their messaging through you. An incumbent politician of any level should not have the right to insist that you put their message in your place of business. And that applies to virtual places as much as it applies to physical places. Even, I would argue, more so. Because you could argue that, well, all the billboards were blown down in town, so we need to put up this tornado message in here, and the government would like to put up this thing on the wall to remind everybody to take shelter when this is happening until we get the billboards back up, that the state pays for it. So we need to put this in your diner, whether you believe it or not, that kind of thing. But in a virtual space, there is no space. There is no physical space taken up. The servers that are in there are the private space of all these things, but not all of them are even in the United States. Thanks to blockchain, most of your tweets are stored on multiple servers the world over in case some of them goes down. And so ultimately what I'm saying is that the Republicans are, oddly enough, arguing for a bizarrely North Korean slash USSR slash Chinese system. And it's very bizarre. Yeah, I'm going to be on earlier tonight because of the show I have this evening, because I'm on East Coast time and I have to travel from my hotel to my place. And if I was on at my normal time, I'd have to rush out. So I'm trying to keep that. It goes right up to showtime here, so I have to move it back a little bit. Damn, I thought it was a cloud. Yeah, it kind of is. It's a digital cloud. Oh yeah, John, I saw the Pat Robertson clip floating around. I have not watched it because it's one of those things I might want to do this afternoon, or on a, much earlier. All right, I'll try. I'm going to the gym at 3, where our dear friend Mark is going to meet me over there to work out. Look at that. And that's what you call a Patreon meetup. Get fit with HAL. The G7 released a statement. That'll be worth looking at. I'll read it after this is over. Someone on Twitter called Boebert Notorious GED. I'm dying. Yeah, I've seen that one before. That is good. That clip is disturbing. Oh, with Pat. Well, the Lord is directing everything he does because we're all just on a slip and slide of the Lord's making, which is basically his argument. So at the same time, every decision Biden's making is fine. Then shut the fuck up. If it's out of your hands, that's the other thing. Like, all these people are like, this is all God's work. Well, what isn't God's work? If something's God's work, then it's all God's work. So shut the fuck up. Take your hands off the reins and stop trying to jerk God around. But you don't understand. The people that I like
are guided by God's hand willfully, and the people that I don't like are guided by the devil's hand or God's hand in intermittent fluctuations negatively. And pass the pancake batter. Fucking hell. Can we, sorry, I'm looking at the chat. It's zipping by. Russia's blocking Facebook access. Yawn. Of course they are. Because Russia's, you know, and again, Trump wouldn't have even won if Russia hadn't paid for ads and sites on in 2016 on Facebook. I mean, Facebook was the effective super PAC for Trump running in 2015. He never would have even beaten his rivals if that had not happened. Sorry. He was on a hard fate. He would have been a joke. He would have been expelled early. But they gave him, because of social media flourishing, they gave him a platform he would not have otherwise had. Also, a platform that is effectively dying as a control point. You know, there was a time when you could have affected people's financial outlook for their kids going to college by how expensive Beanie Babies were becoming. And then once Beanie Babies were no longer a thing, that lowered the amount of money some folks had to pay for their kids' college. Beanie Babies had no intrinsic value. They were just new, and someone thought that they would be something in the future that people would want if you collected them. That's it. It's a dumb idea. The same thing is true of social media. That we went through a phase where trolls were very emotionally, oh my God, if someone trolled, oh my God. Oh, it's terrible. Yeah, I mean, you had in 2014, leading up to Trump starting to run, CNN and other news groups were so new to the idea of Twitter and Facebook that they were reading the statements of people on Twitter with their stupid fake names, not their real names. And even if they had real sounding names, no way to verify it or no even bother. There was no blue check kind of functionality to it. They were just like, James 1077425 Nugget says, and they would read out these tweets as if they were genuine. Well, that's just the dinner bell for anybody who wants to throw a monkey wrench in the media system going forward, because you don't even have to be real, and the news will read your opinion on the air. It's crazy. Don't do that. It's stupid. But they bought it for a while, and the Russians in particular, you know, because it's cheaper than actual physical warfare, went, oh shit, we just buy our way into social media accounts. They just want the bodies in there. They just want the accounts. They're not paying attention. So we'll just print fake accounts, and then we can sway entire trends online. Look at the hashtags that show up that these assholes chase. Look at the number of bots that fall in behind going, you don't know, and cut and paste shit you've seen before. Like the number of cut and paste responses I've seen to tweets that I have that are, you know, like pro-Russian followers jumping in there, and they're all saying exactly the same thing. Like, dude, you gotta at least put it in your own words. I mean, I would phone it in if I was them too. I mean, you're not getting as much. The ruble's not worth as much. I don't know why you would put in the extra hour of creative work on whatever the Macedonian version of Fiverr is. I don't have any idea how you would do that. But in kind of growing through this, we are, and the response from social media networks pushing back on this kind of thing, we're starting to get an idea of how much we should trust what we read online, how much we can get baited. A lot of people are, you know, for a while it was viral videos that were cut very tightly that didn't show context, and people would just jump on those, and that would get your energy up, and then they'd be back. Sorry about that. Hi, everybody. I got kicked off just as I was saying that. Look at that. That was weird. I've been attacked. It's the Russians. It's so funny. What? So yes, they found us. I'm back. I'm fine. It's interesting though that the Russians figured out that they could buy their way into this conversation. It was an edit. Yeah, I just cut something out. I must have said something terrible. Yeah. So it wasn't your internet. I think it's just the hotel here just went, knock it off. Russian hackers, absolutely. It's fascinating to me that they think this is going to work forever. that this plan to manipulate everyone, and I don't know where I was in this conversation when it got bounced off, but I was talking about how for a time viral videos were popping up and it would ratchet up the tension in the United States, and people would be fighting each other either about a police shooting or something like that, and then the context of the video would come out fully and it would undermine the narrative that was sent out, and it would kind of make one side or the other look stupid or whatever, and then create even more tension, yada yada. Okay, and now we've kind of learned that when a video like that comes out, it's okay. Doesn't mean you're less empathetic or you care less about an issue. It actually means you care more if you wait a little bit until you see all the information, because that way you don't get baited into undermining the very thing you care about. You don't have your empathy and your care weaponized against you. And so that was a lesson it took people to learn, took a little time to learn. And now that they've learned it, it's not as functional anymore. And there's plenty of people who are sheepdogging around it that when it does happen, they go, hey, easy, let's see if this really comes out. And this is, even when I'm mentioning stuff that we're seeing coming out about the Ukraine war, it's okay to tap the brakes on your response on some things just to make sure it lines up. It's all right. Doesn't mean you don't care. Caring is not the speed of your reaction, it's the depth of your reaction. And that's fine. And remember, slow is accurate and accurate is fast. That's really crucial. So that said, it's one of the reasons why talking about this NATO text took me a little while, because some of the stuff I was like, rah, this doesn't sound right to me, this argument, and I couldn't remember why, and I had to go do a bunch of reading before I commented on it, so that I would, when I finally talked about this, like the NATO text that I put out, that I wouldn't get ahead of my skis like a bunch of these other idiots have. And if I could leave you guys with anything, and I'm going to sign off for now, and then I'll be back on in a couple of hours, like 3 hours from now. I think I'm going to do 5 o'clock East Coast time, if that's all right to everybody. Approximately for a couple, I'll do a regular 2-hour show. That'll give me enough time at 7 to get out and get to the show. And Cosmic Rose, I look forward to seeing you. And anybody else who's coming, let CSL know, and we'll put you on a list. And if anybody gives you any trouble, just text me. It's we're moving venue to venue. It's very hard to keep some of the guest list stuff straight, but you will be covered. You'll be fine. Don't worry about it. You'll be fine. All right. So CSL will be here this afternoon. So the thing I want you guys, and I think maybe that's the Sparksism of the day, is slow is accurate, accurate is fast. When it comes to responding to a threat or an idea or a premise that in some ways sounds suspect or counter to your ethics or whatever, it is totally reasonable to say, I need to check that out. And then going and checking it out and having your response actually germinate in your thoughts for real before you respond. Because that's the fast way to respond. That's genuinely fast. Making a quick mistake is actually antithetical to doing the right thing. So in those moments, yes, Jill Carter, yes, we will see you tonight. Yay! So I have that in mind as stuff pops up, and understand that it is okay not to speed react to things that might seem, unsourced or too quickly released, or honestly like bait. Don't allow your empathy to be weaponized against you. Don't get baited into argument for argument's sake, because ultimately, if you're, and this goes to sort of why knights believed that the true knight would prevail, is that ultimately, if you have truth on your side, you fight with a depth and a focus that the other side just can't afford to have, because they're lying and they know they're lying. And that's crucial. So give yourself that space, and your best response might be sometimes when you see something, especially on social media, especially in a post, is to go on a deep dive watching and reading, because that's as much a quick reaction you can have. That's, a lot of people look for that dopamine reflex of saying something, of input, as if that's your only way of engaging with something is direct input. Sometimes your best input is research and recognition, and context, and that's totally cool. And sometimes you might find out you're wrong about something, that thing that they're presenting that you were suspicious about is actually genuine, and you're like, oh yeah, I thought it sounded hinky, but that's actually the truth. That's equally as good. That's a good thing to find out. The truth is always valuable. And knowing about it, and again, a truth and a reality can sometimes be separate from each other. You can believe that the truth is all people are equal and be confronted with a reality where people aren't. You understand? That doesn't mean that the reality means that this isn't a truth. As in, we hold these truths, that kind of a truth, versus a current reality. Because every great movement forward for humanity has been antithetical to the reality at the time. And so therefore a truth is deeper than a reality oftentimes. And then when that reality that you're faced with is not the truth, it's just the current circumstance based on a series of lies or a lie itself. And it will fall when confronted with the truth. And that reality can be very ugly for a time, and you'll have someone like Vladimir Putin trying to flatten Ukraine lest they become a free liberal democracy, because he cannot stand up to it. That's, that can be a reality while the truth can still stand. And you can also confront a reality that's in front of you. This happened and it shouldn't have happened. And here's why I believe it shouldn't have happened. Or this happened and it should, that should be the way things are. And this is why I believe it should. Your personal truth interjected in the current reality. And it's okay to take a pause and time that. So there you go. Other than that, except for Truth Social, which still won't let me on. Apparently these kind of truths are not welcome. But there you go. So on that note, take care of yourself and take care of somebody else. And I will see you guys later this afternoon. And don't forget, oh, that's awesome. Thanks for cheering. Yay. I need to make that bigger on this screen, I think. I think you guys deserve to be larger. I'm going to, for later on when I'm screening, because I don't need that much wall space. I will, I'll let you guys go, and then I'll see you in a couple of hours. I'm going to be on at 5 p.m. approximately Eastern time tonight, just so I have time to get to my show. So it might be a little earlier, a little before, depending on the hotel hookup and Russian hackers. But I will do my best, and I will see you guys in a little bit. You are awesome. In the immortal words of Serpent ZA, stay awesome. All right, I'll see you guys later. Dun, 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 dun. Oh, I have to play the theme song. Hold on. There we go. I need more graphics on the end of this. I gotta fix that. That's just not. That's a little better. Let me keep